Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In today's video, I am going to figure out where this toilet is leaking from. Now, the homeowner said that it's leaking from the wax seal, but without actually seeing it, I can't be certain. Now, guys, this toilet is a 50-year-old toilet, so it has a 13 liter per flush, so the tank itself is massive and it's a round bowl. But install, this style of install is typical with what you will still see nowadays. I will link into the description the first toilet that I did on the channel, the how to remove and replace the toilet, as well as the Toto specialty install, so you guys can have some contrast. But this should be a relatively straightforward job as long as there is no water damage or anything else. So what we'll do now is material and tools. All right, this is our materials list. So I have a toilet line. I don't know if there is an original chrome, brass, or copper toilet line, but if there is, I'm just going to replace it with something modern. I have a regular wax seal. I also have a max wax. The max wax has 40% more wax, and it has the can't leak. I don't know which one I need, so I'm going to take both. I have gloves, shims, also known as wobble wedges, T-bolts, and then I have my toilet kit in case I need anything else that I am not currently prepared for. Guys, this is what I believe I need for material for this job. So what we'll do now is the tools list. All right, guys, this is our tools list. So I have a big tote to throw the toilet into. I have a hacksaw in case I need it for the T-bolts. I've got my pump to get any remaining water out of the tank. And then I have my finishing kit. So this has crescent wrench, rapid wrenches, and then anything else I might need on this job. Guys, this is what I need for tools. So let's get started. All right, this is our toilet. This is a round bowl opposed to elongated. The shutoff is off to the left for the water. And you can see the tank. This is a 13 liter tank. This is the old style. With the lid off, we see the internals for the tank. So I'm pointing to the water level. You can see the staining, which means that the water level was higher than what was designed for the tank. I don't know if this toilet was a running toilet for a while. That is the fill valve, the rod. With this old style, a lot of people would tend to bend the rod down instead of using the adjustment screw. So here I'm moving the lever for the flapper, and I'm grabbing the chain that will connect the lever to the flapper so you can flush the toilet. First thing that needs to be done is the caps for the T-bolts need to be removed. Use a small flathead between the bowl and the cap to pull the cap off. All it does is snap onto the plastic washer to hold it in place. Now I'm disconnecting the toilet line. The stop has already been shut off by the homeowner, so I didn't need to do it. For the T-bolts, just loosen off the nuts. If the nut and the bolt are spinning together like they are for me, just use a flathead or needle nose pliers to hold the bolt in place and loosen off the nut. Once the nut has been loosened off, go ahead and do the other side. It doesn't matter which side you do first. Just do them both, and then the toilet, if it hasn't been caulked, it'll be easy to pull off. With both nuts removed, the toilet can now be pulled off. Now this toilet doesn't have any water in the bowl, so be aware if you do, water will splash. Scrape off the old wax from the bowl, and if there's anything left on the flange, scrape that off as well. Now I'm going to inspect the flange. I'm just using a file, but push up and down, move the flange around to see if it's still solid or not. The flange is good, so I'm going to use a regular wax seal because the flange is slightly above the floor, so a max wax isn't necessary. Normally I'll put the wax seal down first, so I'll have something to block the T-bolt in case I drop it so it doesn't go down the drain. Next, it's going to be the T-bolt. So put the T-bolt into the groove and give it a spin spin, so it's perpendicular to the groove, so you have more to catch onto the flange. So now looking at our flange, we have the wax seal down, we have our T-bolts in the middle. Now this is an old flange, so it only has 4 screws. Nowadays they have 6, and you can also notice that the screws are rusted, but everything is still in good shape. There's no need to change the screws out for new ones. Besides that, I also don't have permission from the homeowner. So now I'm going to put the toilet back down. I ran into a problem where there's wax still in the hole. That's what I'm pushing out right now. If you have a problem with your T-bolt staying up straight, maybe there's a little bit of a gap between the flange and the floor, you can always put wax on the top of the T-bolt between the T-bolt and the flange to help hold the T-bolt in place. And this is a very common thing to have happen. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm putting wax on the top of the T-bolt, and then I'm putting the T-bolts back in. Now I'm going to reinstall the toilet. So the key things here are, you need to make sure that you can feel the wax compress, and you need to go straight down. Try to go level as you can, front to back, left to right. Otherwise, you can mash your wax seal and you can have a leak. Now I'm going to put the plastic washer, metal washer, and then the nut back onto the T-bolt. So the plastic washer will stay this side up on the one side. If you put the plastic washer upside down, the cap to cover the T-bolt won't snap down. With both nuts hand tightened, take a wrench and tighten both nuts down. Now go back and forth from side to side as you tighten them down. What you want to do is tighten down the T-bolts until the toilet is snug, not rocking. You're not looking to tighten the nuts down until you feel resistance. That's not the idea. You just need to tighten it down enough where the toilet is nice and solid. And if you manage to tighten it too much, you can break the bowl. I've never done this, and you really have to be fairly aggressive for this to happen. Now I am reconnecting the toilet line. So for the plastic nut going to the tank, hand tight only. You are not allowed to put a wrench on this. If your toilet cracks or leaks and the insurance company notices wrench marks, you will not be covered. Now turn the valve on, open it all the way, and because this is not a quarter turn valve, once it's open all the way, give it a quarter turn back into the right so the valve doesn't seize to its body. Now I'm going to connect the flapper chain to the lever. You want the chain to be tight. You don't want slack. Like you see here, there's a lot of slack. So when you pull the lever, it's not going to flush the toilet. So make sure that the chain is tight so you don't have any play. So here there's still a little bit of play, so I'm going to readjust it again. So I'm going to readjust the chain once again. This time it's tight. You can see how you barely touch the handle and there's almost no slack on the chain. Allow the tank to fill up, and now we need to set the water level for the toilet. So the water level is just below the brim of the overflow tube in the middle. You can see how the water level is a quarter inch over the line in the tank. So pull the lever to get the fill valve to turn on. You don't have to flush the entire tank, it'll take too long. So just push the flapper down by hand and then allow the tank to refill. So this screw is to adjust the water level. If you turn it to the right to tighten the screw down, that's going to lower the ball, which will lower the water level. And now here, just actuate the flapper just to get the fill valve to turn on so you can check the water level. Here I'm going to move the trailing water line so it's not touching the rod. But if this water line is not going down the overflow tube, make sure that you put it back in, because this is going to leave trailing water going into the bowl. Here you can see water dripping from the side of the fill valve, but since it's going into the tank anyway, this is not a reason for concern. So after flushing the toilet a few times, I realized something was leaking. You can see a drop of water where I'm pointing to. So you only have three possibilities for a leak between the tank and the bowl. It's either going to be one of the two bolts on the left and right side of the flapper, or the gasket that is for the flapper between the tank and the bowl. I didn't film this, but I've already shut off the valve. I flushed the toilet and I disconnected the water line. So make sure that you have a container so when you loosen off the nuts, you catch any water. You can see the bolt with the rubber gasket that goes on the inside of the tank. With both bolts now loosened off, the tank can be removed. Make sure you have a container to catch any water that drips out of the tank, as you see dripping from the left side. Now we can see the gasket in the middle and the two holes for the bolts. The gasket is all crusty, and this toilet was leaking when it flushed. That means this gasket is now no good. If the bolts are leaking, the toilet will leak all the time. Here I'm using a flathead to try to scrape away the old gasket. This worked okay, but I decided to grab a copper fitting brush to do a better job to clean this off, and that's what I'm doing now. Do the best that you can, but also be careful that you don't scratch the plastic, because you can have a leak later on if you damage it. So this is a tank to bolt kit. It has a rubber for the flapper and then new T-bolts and rubber gaskets as well. The tapered side goes down towards the bowl, so make sure that you don't put this thing in upside down. Now we're going to look at the bolts. So the bolts have a groove in the middle for a flathead screwdriver for when you tighten the nut on. If the whole thing spins, then you can hold it in place. But the metal washer will go on, then the rubber. The rubber will be between the head of the bolt and the inside of the tank to seal it from water. Now I'm going to clean the old gasket off and then wipe down where the tank sits on top of the bowl. Make sure you get this gasket off because it's a bad reason to have a leak. I'm just going to use once again a copper fitting brush to get the bits of gasket that are still stuck where the new gasket is going to seal between the tank and the bowl. Now I'm going to put the tank back down. I put the bolts in. You don't need to. You can put the tank down and then put the bolts in. But everything will line up really well, so this isn't difficult to do. So for the bottom, it'll go bowl, rubber washer, metal washer, and then the nut. So once again, we're going to hand tighten both nuts before we take a wrench to it. Now guys, be careful about over tightening because you can crack the tank. So you can't see this, but I have my right hand in the tank holding the head of the bolt in place. If the whole thing spins, use a flathead to hold the bolt in place. Now we'll see the rubber washer, how it's being compressed by the bolt to the tank. If you have a leak from the rubber, you can put a tiny bit of putty. I prefer putty over silicone because putty is easy to remove. But check both sides to make sure that the rubber is being compressed. Once again, tighten both nuts back and forth together. Give it a shake. Again, you don't want to over tighten here. Now it's time to check for leaks. So check both bolts and then the rubber gasket for the flapper on both sides. Look on the floor to see if there's any water. The bowl is sweating here. It's just condensation. There's nothing actually leaking. If everything is good, the last thing that needs to be done is the T-bolts need to be cut off. Otherwise, the toilet caps won't snap down. The very last thing to do is to cut down the T-bolts. Cut them low enough where the toilet cap is going to snap onto the plastic washer. When you get 3/4 of the way through, you can use the blade of this hacksaw to bend the bolt and then just move it back and forth with your hand to get it to snap off. Clean off the brass shavings and then put the toilet cap on and just give it a smack with your hand and you should hear it snap on. If the cap isn't snapping on, you didn't cut the bolt down low enough. Alright guys, so that concludes this job. So installing a toilet is a relatively straightforward thing as long as you don't have a damaged flange or a rotten floor, then it should be relatively straightforward. Shims are optional, it depends, but this house it's 50 years old, it's been maintained very well. Things went really smoothly on this job. The only thing that I wasn't expecting was the tank to bolt gasket leaking, but I had one on hand, so everything worked out well. The time on this job, the time was about 75 minutes. I didn't run into any other problems other than the one for unforeseen circumstance, so I'm very happy with this. Everything went well. The toilet was nice and solid, so there are no complaints from me on this job. The cost of this job, the T-bolts, the wax seal, the tank to bolt kits, they're all probably about $20 in total. This is not expensive, but the labor is what's going to run up the cost. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, till next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.